Alright guys, hope you're doing well today. Welcome back to the channel. So in today's video I'm going to be talking about weddings, marriage. As somebody that is married, I don't particularly have a problem with people getting married necessarily, but I definitely think that we live in a society, a culture, certainly the Western world, where I think these days, not everybody, but I think for quite a lot of people, marriage is more of a kind of show. Really, it's more of almost a kind of theatrical production. It's a kind of drama. It's a kind of spectacle, really, and that really irks me, you know. It really, at the end of the day, I suppose, if you've got the money and you want to go and spend, a couple of grand on a wedding, whatever, that's on you, really. That's up to you at the end of the day. But I think, like anything in life, I think if you're gonna commit to something like that, then I think you should do it for the right reasons, really. If you really love someone, I don't really think that you have to go through the rigmarole and stress, quite frankly, of dealing with all the, paperwork, all the financial stuff tied to it. I don't really think that a wedding is, in my opinion, something that you need to do to prove your worth as a man. I don't think you have to have, you don't have to have your worth validated by a woman. That's one of the reasons why I don't like this thing of proposals and how it's often, just kind of in general, how marriages have kind of been skewed towards this kind of almost kind of toxic femininity, I guess you would call it. This thing of, I guess it's like there's a kind of a lot of like, I don't know what you would class it as. A kind of some kind of like feminist elements in it, I guess, maybe. I don't know. I just don't really think that. I don't think that you need to get married to prove that you love somebody. Quite frankly, I really don't. I think if you really care about somebody, I don't think you should have to spend thousands of pounds on them, picking out a dress or whatever it is. And I also think it kind of actually, it's a kind of a bit, it kind of makes caricatures out of people, I think. And I think it's kind of patronizing to women. I think it's kind of demeaning in some ways, like reducing both men and women to kind of almost cosplay or something. I don't know. It kind of almost ridicules the whole concept of a long-term relationship, which is kind of what a marriage is supposed to kind of indicate, represent, that this is two people that want to be together for the foreseeable future, at least. And I don't know. I just don't like the idea. Just don't really like the whole spectacle of it all. This kind of egotistical, self-centered, almost kind of narcissistic kind of thing about it. It's this thing of, we're important. We are special people because we're wearing, because we've got suits on, because one of us is wearing a dress, and just this whole thing of it being skewed mostly towards women, really, which is, let's be honest about it, that's what really most marriages really are about. It's about the woman more than the man. Yes, it is about both, but predominantly it's about the woman. It starts off with a proposal, like I said, doesn't it? Like I said, most of the time, not always, but usually it's the man that proposes to the woman. if it's a heterosexual relationship. And then obviously, then at some point that marriage gets, the tick of approval, probably by the woman, probably more often than not, I'd imagine. Because obviously, like I said, the proposal's basically there. It gives women power, doesn't it? That's what that really does. It gives women this empowerment. It's this thing of what the woman says is the ultimate decision kind of a thing, and I think at the end of the day, I think if people are going to propose, it should happen both ways, really. I think does the man want to get, if we're going to have fairness, then let's have it. If you're going to have equality, let's have equality. And I just think that, I don't know, I just think that it's just kind of really unhealthy, I think. Because what essentially man's being reduced to in that proposal thing is that, will you validate my worth as a man? Will you validate me as an equal partner in this thing? It's like, but I don't know. I just don't like that kind of begging thing, that kind of groveling thing of like, please, validate me, please accept me, please boost my ego, please put me on a pedestal kind of a thing. It's like, I don't know. And we wonder why there's so many relationships that end so sourly when you've got the foundations of a marriage built upon that kind of a thing. Not exactly a fucking surprise, is it? And then obviously when the relationships then progress to an actual marriage, where again, the marriage is predominantly about the woman. The woman picks out a dress, the woman gets walked down the aisle. It's the woman that gets the flowers and all that kind of like the trimmings of the tradition, all that kind of stuff. It's predominantly about hair, 9 times out of 10. And I'm not necessarily saying that makes people bad, but I don't think that it makes people. It doesn't make people bad, but I don't really think it's a very healthy dynamic. Because what marriages tend to do, in those types of marriages anyway, or rather weddings, to be accurate, they kind of set in motion this idea that unless you're willing to spend thousands of pounds or dollars, whatever, on your woman, then you're not worthy. You're not good enough. You don't meet the expectations of the female in that relationship. You're not good enough as a man. And what you're doing is you're putting that woman upon a pedestal, essentially worshipping that individual, kind of almost making them into a kind of godlike figure. And again, I don't really think that's very. I just don't think that's healthy, really. I'm sorry that a lot of people, I'm sure, would probably find what I'm saying to be kind of a bit offensive, maybe a bit controversial, and that's fine. You're entitled to have your own opinions. But this is just my stand on it. This is just how I feel about it. I don't think you need to go through a wedding in the traditional sense to prove yourself to somebody. I mean, surely you would think that by the time you've got to the point of proposing, you've proved yourself anyway, haven't you? You know, that's surely you shouldn't really have to propose to somebody. I don't think. I don't really see the point in that. It's like, you know, if you've been with someone for 2, 4, 5, 6 years, and then you have a wedding, then just go and have your wedding. It's like, why do you have to propose, and why does it always have to be in public? You know, like, why does everything always have to be this public spectacle? You know, the proposal, the wedding, you know, the sharing everything on social media. It's like, why does everything always have to be this thing of, it's got to be exposed to everybody? It's like, it's supposed to be about you and your partner. It's not about the public. It's not about your friends even. You could even argue it's not even really about your family. It's about you and that other person, because you're the people that are going to be living together for the foreseeable future, if not potentially for the rest of your lives. So I've just never really understood it. I've just never really quite got the whole, you know, craze, the whole kind of like exaggerated enthusiasm about traditional weddings and things like that. It's for me, it's more of a kind of status thing. It's more of a symbol thing. It's like, look how much money I've got, you know. Look what I could afford, you know. Look at my trophy wife, kind of a thing. It's like, I think so many people get caught in that dynamic. They get caught in wanting to make their partner happy, kind of living up to that expectation, cultural, societal expectation that, oh, well, now that you're in your mid or late 20s or in your 30s, well, I've got to get married now, obviously. I've got to settle down because I'm this age, you know. We've got to go through the whole, you know, the typical processes of securing a long-term partnership. You know, the whole thing of like best man speech, you know, the dancing and all that kind of stuff. It's just a bit cringe to me. It's just too much. It just gives off acting vibes, you know what I mean? It's like, it's just too much drama going on. There's too much need for attention all the time. That's not really me, actually. As much as I have my own YouTube channel, but I don't upload very often, and when I do, it's always usually about something important or something I think needs to be talked about. So I only really upload when I really feel like I've got something worth to say about something. But apart from that, I'm not really an attention-seeking person, really, in many respects. Or you might not think that, but I'm not someone that particularly likes being in the spotlight. I'm not someone that particularly likes socialising. I'm not that kind of person. But anyway, that's kind of besides the point. I don't know. It's just this kind of this. You know, there's just so much of this kind of stuff that's just. I think a lot of it's just performative. It's what people feel that they're expected to do, you know, rather than what they really truly feel and think about what they're doing. I think for a lot of men, in my opinion anyway, not all, but a lot of men, I think they just kind of feel not so much dragged, but they just feel pressured into it, I think. Especially when they see their friends that are married or are getting married, or they want to settle down, maybe someone have children. So there's this sense, you know, there's this kind of romanticized kind of image that we have in our heads of weddings and marriages, and I think yes, it's great to have memories, it's great to have photos and things like that, but yeah, again, why are you really getting married? What are you getting married for? I mean, are you getting married just so you can say that you got married? Are you getting married just so that you can use it to your advantage in some kind of, I don't know, legal manner of some sort at some point for something, maybe? I just think, like I said earlier, I really think that you've got to get married for the right reasons, because otherwise it'll come back to bite you in the ass eventually. And also one of the issues of marriage is getting married is that, life is unpredictable, life has its ups and downs, and finances aren't always going to be stable. And I think if you build your relationship built on the idea of proving yourself, proving your worth as a male partner in that dynamic with a woman financially, and there comes a point where that's no longer working anymore because you've hit some rough patch or something's gone on, whatever it might be financially, that you can't afford the kind of lifestyle you used to have, or whatever it might be, then you've already, let's be honest, you've kind of built your relationship already on rocky foundations. And that's often why so many women tend to start looking at other guys, start having affairs, because the whole idea, the whole concept was that you put that woman on a pedestal, and she got used to you kind of worshipping her, and her being the center of attention, the center of importance, the center of focus in that dynamic. Now, and when that stops happening, or when that starts to deteriorate, that's when you're in trouble. That's when a relationship starts to get rocky, and before you know it, affairs are happening, and then she usually wants to get a divorce at some point, or the guy figures out what's going on or whatever and just walks away, or files for divorce, whatever it might be. But even then, I think most men tend to try and stick marriages out because, let's face it, again, the divorce courts and all that kind of stuff is favoured predominantly is biased towards women. And again, I think that's deeply corrupt and deeply unfair, deeply unjust, especially when kids are involved in the mix as well. So I think really, I think at the end of the day, if you really love someone, that's wonderful. Love is a genuine love is a wonderful thing. But I don't think that you should have to go and get a piece of paper to prove that. I don't think that you need to put on a show for hundreds of thousands of people to show that you really love and care about somebody. I don't think. But I think, a lot of the time weddings are just for people who've done well financially, or just, obviously saved up enough money to be able to have one. But also it's often people that just like being the center of attention. They want to be in the spotlight. It tends to attract those types of people, I think. Especially these days, maybe not so much in the past, but I think nowadays it tends to lean more towards, and especially with social media being what it is now, I definitely think weddings are a far cry from what they used to really be about, and what they used to represent. When you look at like wedding photos of like your grandparents or your great grandparents, those were, okay, there was a different time, it was a much more conservative time, and there were complications surrounding those kind of things. But essentially, those people, for the most part anyway, tended to stick together for decades, usually. Now, again, like I said, it's not quite as cut and dry, as simple as some people might try to make it out to be, but you know, people unfortunately did tend to stay in marriages that were unhealthy back in just a few decades ago, really, for all sorts of reasons. But I suppose certainly during like the 40s, 50s, 60s, probably 70s, and certainly long before that, because it was kind of frowned upon. It just wasn't a good look to be seen as someone that was divorced. So yeah, you know, that obviously that was wrong, and there were a lot of people in very unhappy relationships and marriages, and you know, I certainly don't want that to come back. So I just don't. I think, really, to be honest with you, I think weddings are outdated. I really do. I think they're a relic of the past. You know, as far as that's just my opinion. I don't think, you know. So you see, people like to believe in this whole kind of traditional cultural stuff and whatever. You know, you do you, but I don't really think there's a place for it anymore. I think it's just something that it's often, I think, just something for people to say when they're old and grey, that, you know, look, there's me when I was 20 something, 30 something. You know, I mean, whatever, you know, whatever. You know, if that's how insecure you are about yourself and how desperate you are to feel important, to feel like your life meant something to you, and whatever. You know, like I said, social media is just such a, I think, a real ball ache these days, actually. I think it's really toxic, really damaging in terms of relationships now, where so much of what used to be people's private lives are now blasted all over Facebook, Instagram, you know, YouTube, whatever. And to me, you know, a marriage, a relationship is supposed to be about the intimacy, and I'm not talking about sex here, but you know, the privacy of two individual people that have lives behind closed doors, just like everybody else is supposed to have. You know, we have our own lives behind the closed door, behind our own doors of our houses, because this is where the only place where we really truly get to be ourselves. And I think once you start blasting on social media weddings, even funerals these days, what the fuck? To me, yeah, I was at one of my wife's family members' wedding. What was it, a couple of months back now, a couple of weeks ago, whenever it was, I can't remember. And it was a couple of months ago now. It's just crazy how quickly time's going. But and even then, I was just like, you know, as much as it was nice to see the young couple married and whatever, I think I could kind of see it in that they kind of weren't really that into it. They were just kind of doing it because the family wanted it, and I just think it's a real shame, that kind of stuff. I don't think that you should feel that forcefulness to do something just because it's normal. You know, it's what people expect of you. It's what people want you to do. Well, and that's the problem with society and cultural elements, is that it creates this pressure to conform. It creates this pressure to fit in. It creates this pressure to be seen as normal. You know, I'm normal because I got married. I'm normal because I have a 9-to-5 job. I'm normal because I have a car. I'm normal because I have a house. I'm normal because I have kids. I'm normal because I'm married. I just think that you should just do you. Do what you really want to do. not what other people think that you should do, not what you feel pressured into. Do what you really want to do. And if that means upsetting people along the way, fuck it. It's your life. This is your life. You're on a one-way run to your grave. All right? It's a one-way street. You only get one chance to live this life, and I think you should live it how you see fit, how you want to live it. And fuck everybody else, quite frankly. You know, I don't think you should. If you don't want to get married, don't get married. If you want to get married, go and get married. But again, you know, just be very careful. Be very, very careful. You know, it's not always what you think it is. In fact, a lot of things aren't what you think they are, and that's why people get more and more disappointed as they get older, and less enthusiastic about life, because that's what you come to realise, that the world that you thought you were gonna, the world that you thought existed, it does exist, but it's not as glossy as you think it is. And that applies to all sorts of different areas of life, but certainly when it comes to long-term relationships, marriages, you know, weddings are great. Weddings, you know, they're just like the beginning of a relationship. It's a great thing, isn't it? It's a nice feeling. You know, it's like being outside of yourself temporarily, kind of a thing, and that's great. And I'm not saying you can't do that. If you want to go and get married, and whatever. But I don't think that you should get married because you want to put on a show for people. I don't think you should get married just to please your parents or to please your close social circle, or to please purely just for the sake of pleasing your partner. I don't think you should do it like that. I think you should get married because you want to get married. You know, call me an idealist if you want, but you know, in hindsight, I certainly wish. You know, I wish I'd kind of got married for the right reasons, and I didn't. If I'm being honest about it, I mean, yeah, of course, I love my partner, but I think I've mentioned before on the channel, I didn't purely just get married for that. I got married because of the legal, you know, the benefits of being married, as far as living here is concerned, as far as visa stuff and things like that. But it wasn't just that. It was obviously, I had met somebody who I really felt comfortable around, and I felt that she loved me and I loved her, and I still do. But it's messy. It can get messy, and I understand that. I understand that it can get messy, but I think as long as you I'd say as long, overall, if your heart's in the right place, then go ahead and do it. But you know, it does get tricky. Life can get. It's nuanced. It's messy sometimes, and it's not always. Things aren't always as simple as you would like them to be. But if you're in a position where you don't have to get married, then don't. If you don't really feel it, if you don't really want to, don't do it. Just don't do it. All right. I think sometimes it's better to just. You know, sometimes it's better to be alone. Sometimes it's better to be single for a prolonged period of time rather than getting involved with someone that you might care about, you might love, but you're not really feeling it. You know, it's not really boosting you in any way. You're not really getting anything out of it. Neither person's getting anything out of it. And that's the thing, is I think so many people are just so quick to jump into this, what they think is going to be some kind of Disney-like story, of some happy ending story, you know, some Disney-like depiction of you know, a future relationship, and that isn't, unfortunately, that isn't how it works. that's just real life, marriages are complicated, people are complicated, and marriages change. Individually we change. That changes the dynamic of the relationship over time. You get older and things start to change, and you do have moments where you do question whether you want to be married anymore. Where you do have moments where you think to yourself, would I be happy being single? Would I be better off on my own? And there'll be a lot of people out there now getting married today, probably having some of those thoughts. Some people that aren't really, where their hearts aren't really truly in it, that don't really want to get married or get divorced, but for whatever reasons they're going through with it. And it can get tricky. It really can. And I think if you don't do things, if you make decisions based upon what you think is going to please other people, you're going to end up a very unhappy person eventually. You're going to live a very unfulfilled life, and you're going to live eventually with regrets and guilt, because you're not living the life that you really want to live. And there are a lot of people out there living that life. And I myself, I suppose, at times have lived that life as well. And that's not easy to admit. It's not easy to admit that, but sometimes I wish I'd been single for longer. I wish I'd had more sexual encounters before I settled down. But at the end of the day, I made my choices, and everyone who's getting married today or tomorrow or whatever, you're making yours. You're making your bed. I think at the end of the day, are you getting married for the sake of, are you getting married because it's a label, because you want that label and whatever comes with it, or are you actually getting married because at the end of the day, what's really the point of a marriage? What does it actually represent anymore these days? What does it mean to get married? What is it about? What does it stand for? Because I think more often than not, it's a kind of almost like a ticking off something off the adult checklist or something. It's like saying, I got married, so I'm an adult now. I had kids, so I'm an adult now. I don't know. It's just a bit kind of ludicrous, and I just found the whole thing of it kind of a bit ridiculous, really. It's just this whole thing of like self-importance, this like I said, putting on a costume. Look at me, look how special I am, look how important I am, look how different I am than everybody else. It's not easy, it's not hard to see why so many men get treated with such shocking displays of disrespect and contentment after a while when you place the expectations of other people over your own happiness. That's a disaster waiting to happen. And when you're essentially living your life for other people, you're going to start to resent that other person. And again, that's a disaster waiting to happen. And that's why so many marriages ended in divorce. That's why so many marriages become toxic and dysfunctional, because the very thing that built that marriage, the wedding, is in and of itself, I suppose, depending on how you look at it, you could argue that is, it's the beginning of the end, isn't it? It's like it's you're setting, it's a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy or something like that. It's a kind of, you're setting yourself up for failure almost in a way. Not exactly, but I think it really just depends what the kinds of people that are getting married, I think, and what kind of marriage. If it's just like a very small ceremony or something like that, then that's fine, I suppose. But or if it's like a registration-based registry office thing, that's fine. But when you go to get these like big spectacle weddings where there's like hundreds of 100 people or hundreds or thousands of people there, it's like I don't know how I feel about that really. That's not my kind of thing. A marriage is a very difficult thing to tolerate, or rather, a long-term relationship is whatever. I don't really know what the difference is between a long-term relationship and being married. Really, pretty much the same thing, isn't it? So. The only difference between a marriage and a long-term relationship is that when you're married, there are consequences if that relationship doesn't work out. Because you have to go and get a divorce. Well, financially anyway, and certainly in terms of, getting married again in the future, well, that can affect things, but and having to be honest about it, that it's certainly not it's certainly not a good look. It's certainly not a very confidence-building thing, isn't it? I mean, having to go through divorce, it's not a pleasant ordeal for anybody really. But at least for women, there's a lot more support out there for when they go through divorce than there is for men. I suspect anyway. The men often get blamed for divorces, even though it takes two to tango, but it also takes two to break a relationship as well. I would say it's both to blame. Both are just as bad as each other, probably. Yes, there are circumstances where one person's been cheating, but I think you do have to be honest and look at what's going on. You don't excuse shitty behaviours in any circumstances, regardless of whoever's been doing that, whether it's the man or the woman. But you do have to look at what's gone on there and figure out what's gone sour along the way. And sometimes it's complacency, sometimes it's just boredom. The relationship is just kind of hit rock bottom. It's just kind of got stuck in a rut for years. It's just kind of become just tedious, boring, obnoxious. Just people just kind of got fed up with each other, which is what usually happens. People just kind of get to a point where there's nothing left to say, there's nothing really left to do, and eventually, old age creeps in. Eventually, if you live long enough, and eventually people just kind of stick together because if they've lived together for that long, they've reached such an age where there's no point bothering with divorce, and they just don't bother in the end. They just stick together. And in the end, they're basically just companions, aren't they, eventually? So it's not so much that people stick marriage out because they necessarily feel the same way about each other anymore, but it's a companionship. It's better than being lonely, I guess, for some people. It's probably how some people justify it. So a wedding is a day. Marriage is a multi-year, if not multi-decade long thing, and I think that people need to take that reality on board very, very seriously before they go and get married, because it only takes a day to get married, and it can take months, if not years, to get a divorce. And if you're someone that likes to be the centre of attention, I would suggest that you go and take some acting classes rather than go and get married, personally. Because I think often those are the types of people that weddings attract, basically. It's like people like that just want to be. And what I mean by that is if they've made of themselves and made the decision to get married, they're probably those types of people. Not always, but I would say a lot of the time. You know, relationship, marriages, it's about breathing space. It's about giving each other time to themselves. It's about letting that person be themselves, letting that person come to you when they're ready, not forcing it all the time, which is I think a lot of young people do. They try and force this love thing onto each other, whether it's sexually or through forms of intimacy, affection, whatever. Now, that's not wrong, but it doesn't translate very well into the long term. You know, within a few years of a relationship, that's fine, but in the long term, you have to be a bit more. You have to be able to manage that kind of stuff better. You need to be able to balance things out a bit more, not be so needy, not be so selfish, not be so desperate for attention in a relationship all the time, because that can get really annoying. You know, there's a big difference between kissing someone and a wedding and then, you know, having to massage someone's feet or something, you know, your wife's feet at the end of a busy day or whatever it is. You know, it's a different world. It's a completely different. It's a different. Yeah, these two things are completely different worlds. A wedding it's really a showcase of different things, and a marriage is really about. You know, long-term relationships are basically about coming to terms with the reality that you're not the center of the universe and they aren't either, right? That you're not as important as you think you are. You're not as special as you think you are. But you do matter, and intimacy matters, affection matters, sex matters. These things do matter. They are things that, but equally space matters. Time alone matters. Doing your own thing, being your own individual matters as well, as much as you being available to your partner, not being something else necessarily, but knowing when to step back and knowing when to push a bit sometimes, knowing when to say the right thing, do the right thing. And that takes experience, you know. It takes time to get to know somebody and to know someone's changes as well, because obviously you're changing. You know, I'm not exactly the same person that I was when I met my wife almost 10 years ago now. You know, I'm 10 years older, so is she. I don't look the same as I used to. You know, I have changed in some ways, and she has, and we both know that about each other. You know, we both know in ourselves that we're not exactly the same people anymore. But we've made a we've really tried our best to deal with that, to try and just work around that. It's like there's not really much you can do about it, is there? It's just aging is what it is. It's like it just is what it is, and you just have to deal with that. Unfortunately, as the time goes on. So I think at the end of the day, I would just say that, be careful what you wish for, be careful what you want in life, and always try to do things that you think are right, that you think that are moral, that sit alongside the values that you believe in, and live life in a way that you want to live, rather than what other people want you to be, other people want you to say, other people want you to fit into. And a lot of people do it. A lot of people get married because they feel that they're crushing that kind of crushingness of loneliness, a sense of abandonment as people get older and their friends start to kind of drop away as they get married and all that kind of stuff, and this kind of perceived notion that they're being judged by people around them because they're single, they're not married, they don't have kids, whatever it is. And there's a lot of that going on because people are very judgmental, sadly. But that's unfortunately that's how a lot of people are. They're very critical, they're very judgmental, very quick to assume. And we often buy into this notion of tradition rather than question it. We tend to buy into it more than we analyse it, than we criticise it, that we delve into it and try to peel back the layers of it. Because I think it's easier for people to. It's very seducing, isn't it? A lot of this stuff, a lot of this traditional, cultural, societal stuff. It's very seducing. It makes you feel that you're doing something. You're carrying some legacy on it. You're carrying something on it. You're playing your part in cultural, heritage. You're playing your part in society. You're doing your bit. You're conforming. You're playing your role. You're following the script. And while it's nice to have some degree of tradition, I think that we should always be willing to sit down and question it and say, what the fuck are we doing here? And why are we doing it? And do we need this anymore? Because things should change. Things do need to change. Just because something's a tradition or part of a culture doesn't mean that it should stay forever. There's I'm guessing probably a lot of things that used to be part of our culture that no longer exist, and probably certainly as far as you can think of certain things in terms of medicine or treatments, punishments, things that no longer exist in our world, thank God. Or thank scientists, and thanks to morally focused, ethically focused philosophers and scholars and whatever, but cultural style changes. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. There's a lot of things I see these days around me, and I just don't really feel connected to a lot of it anymore. I'm very much observing these days and just kind of looking around and thinking, what the fuck are we doing? What are we doing here? What are we What are we achieving? What are we heading towards? We're in 2026. What does this world represent now? What is this world? What is it anymore? I don't know what it is. I don't know what it's supposed to be. I don't know if it's supposed to be anything. I don't know. I can't make head or tail of it anymore. In just so many different ways. I almost feel in a way that we kind of live in a world now that doesn't quite know what it is anymore. We live in a world that's kind of stuck in this kind of 80s, 90s mentality, but yet wants to be 40, 50 years ahead of itself. Sort of. I don't know. I don't know what it. I don't know what what. I don't know what this era is. I don't know what the fuck it is. Honestly, I don't know anymore. I just don't know what this is. And in terms of marriages, just before I finish here, to go back to the topic, I think if you have to struggle, get yourself into debt for the sake of another human being, in my opinion, unless someone's your child, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't get involved with that personally. I don't think it's worth it. Relationships are rocky, things can change, people can get tired and move on, especially women. For a lot of different reasons, they know what they are, and so do men, because we're not all stupid. Some of us actually think about things, some of us see things, some of us make links and realise that the world we were sold, quite frankly, was corrupt and very much skewed and biased and deeply, deeply rotten. I don't think you should have to prove yourself, as far as I'm concerned. I really don't. I don't think you should have to struggle, but that's just me. The thing is that the truth about weddings is that it's become a commodity, hasn't it? It's become a business. It's an industry. That's what weddings are, and as well, and the ugly side of it is as well, is that a lot of people that you might invite to weddings, they don't all have your best interests at heart. They don't all really deeply like you. You might think that they do, but I can guarantee you at least a handful of them are slacking you off behind your back, and yet you're inviting these people to a wedding. I would just say, look, I think you should keep some of this stuff private. That's all I'm saying, really. I think you should just do it for the sake of you and your partner, not your friends, not your family. If you want to invite a few very close, trustworthy people, that's fine. That's great. But apart from that, I would say leave everybody else out of it, and don't blast it all over social media. If you're going to take photos of you and your wife, your husband, that's fine, but keep it for yourself, like it used to be. Because that's why the world feels so shallow, hollow, superficial now, because everything's online. There's nothing feels cherished anymore. Nothing feels valuable because everything's kind of disposable. It's on social media. Everyone posts stuff on Facebook and wherever these days. And before I know it, the next post is on the next post, the next day. And so it just becomes this kind of disposable cycle of things. And it should be something that's valuable and meaningful. And that's why the world feels kind of drab these days, because there's not enough valuable stuff in it. There's not enough cherished, precious stuff in it anymore. We've kind of abandoned that for the sake of this kind of mass hysteria, this mass-produced digital sphere of just void, just nothingness. Really, it's just there's everything, but there's nothing now, and people's private lives get caught up in it. You know, and does a marriage really make a relationship better? Does it make it last longer? Maybe it used to, but probably not so much these days. You know, we live in a much more liberal society now. Whether that's a good thing or not, you can debate that with yourself or others, but that's the world we live in. We live in a kind of hyper-liberalised society now, and you know, and so in some ways that's maybe positive, but in many other ways, I don't think it's as positive as people like to think it is. I think, quite frankly, a lot of it's damaging us really quite severely, and we're going to pay for it in the next couple of decades very, very, very severely. And I don't really care, quite frankly, just before I finish here, whether this makes me unpopular, whether what I say on my channel is offensive to some people, is too controversial, too taboo. I couldn't really give a fuck, because it's my channel, and I will just continue to say what I think, what I really think needs to be said about whatever it is I'm talking about, whatever really I genuinely really believe is true, and I feel strongly opinionated about. I will say it. And if there are some people that come across it that don't like that, you're more than welcome to move on to some other channel, to another place where people are saying things that you agree with, that you like. That's fine. That's all right. I don't really care. I couldn't give a shit. This is my approach to a lot of these things. I'm just saying what I really think is true, what I really believe in, what I'm passionate about, and that's what I do. And if that's not for you, then move on to the next channel. You know, my take on marriage is, if you're going to get married, fine, but don't turn it into a spectacle. Don't turn it into a stage show. Make sure that you get married because you and your partner really both genuinely want to get married. Do it for you, not for the other people that are going to be sitting in the pews or whatever venue you're going to be getting married in. Because let me tell you, maintaining a long-term relationship is really fucking difficult. It's really hard, and a wedding doesn't give you a snapshot of that. It doesn't show you the days where you don't talk to each other, the days where you have arguments, the days where you nearly break up, the days where you basically essentially hate each other's guts for a brief period of time, the days where it's stressful, the days where one of you's tired, the days where, or the weeks or even months where you go without sex, the times when pressures hit, aging hits, health declines, whatever it might be. Weddings don't show you that. If you love someone, love them purely and truthfully, not through some curated spectacle, some kind of entertainment-like thing that a lot of weddings are. Because it's a lot of money and it's a lot of stress. And quite frankly, I personally, in the end, I don't really think it's worth it. I really don't. in terms of the over-the-top ones, anyway. I really don't. And quite frankly, honestly, as I'm getting older, I don't even really think long-term relationships are worth it either. Not a pleasant thing to say, but I don't. It's fun for the first few years, and it's, you know, as much as, like I said, as I love my partner, she loves me, but is it really worth it? I don't know about that. I don't really know. I don't think it is. There were good times, there were good moments, but in general, it's kind of a bit boring, a bit tedious, a bit predictable, a bit repetitive. And if you're not ready for that, don't get married. Don't get involved with someone. Don't waste your life away, and don't waste theirs.